On today's episode of Gathering the Kings.
I got into a car accident in 2018 that should have taken my life and didn't. After that accident, I realized I do not get to choose when I die, but I sure get to choose how I live. If you have a business, no matter where you are, does your community know what those things are? Are you waving your flag? Because if you wave your flag, it allows the universe to work with you to make your things possible. When you're willing to take on things that don't look like your neighbor, you need to be willing to do things that don't look like your neighbor.
What's up, everybody? I'm Chaz Wolfe, Gathering the Kings podcast, coming back to you here today. Special guest. I got a queen here on the Kings stage, Miss Queen Jenn Drummond. How we doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Wonderful. And I told you before we hit the record button that I'm looking for a whole different frequency of energy. You bring inspiration to people all across probably the world with your stages and the talks that you've given. And so I'm just honored to be in the presence, but also to share you with our wonderful audience. So thank you for being here.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Good. Tell us, I kind of just hinted at it a little bit, but tell us what kind of business that you have. What do you do?
Okay, so my primary business is in financial services. I started this company when I had exited college and hired myself out of a job. So we manage about 1 billion in assets and take care of people's financials.
Love
And
it.
then recently, the last few years, I got into mountaineering. I'm writing a book on speaking stages and doing the whole coaching aspect for resilience.
Love it. Well, you just gave us a whole mountain, to use your language, of stuff to talk about. You're managing quite a lot of money, doing it well, I presume at this point, and then you're going to be sharing some other tactics in a book coming up about just how to win in life, but specifically resiliency. Why that topic? I mean, I'm with you on the mountain. You kind of got to press through, but let's dial in on the word resilience. Why does that mean? What does it mean? Why does it mean something to you?
Yeah, I think resilience is the ticket. If we have the ability to keep going forward, to face our obstacles and setbacks and challenges, learn from those and continue, that's where the freedom lies on the other side of those things. We do not want to be caged in by what limits us, but overcome those limits and become more. So I got into mountaineering really on a challenge from my son. I was giving him the proverbial pep talk of we do hard things. And when that happened, he upped my goal of climbing a mountain to something more extreme. And then my coach took it further, and here we are today.
Wow. Okay, well, give us a little of that detail because I want the audience to know what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah.
This goal to climb a mountain, but what did it turn into?
Yeah. So I got into a car accident in 2018 that should have taken my life and didn't. After that accident, I realized I do not get to choose when I die, but I sure get to choose how I live. I definitely was choosing to put my life on hold till my children got to college level, right? And that was my excuse. Society supports it. So I was kind of hiding in that mantra. Thankfully, the accident reminded me that life goes fast. We only get one chance. Who cares what everybody else thinks? What do I want this experience to be for myself? So 2019 became a big year of creating the proverbial bucket list and all the things I wanted to do, see, experience, explore, try in this world before my time's up. And on that list was climb a mountain. So in 2020, I was turning 40. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to climb a mountain for my 40th birthday and launch this decade with something significant. And so I asked some friends that were into mountaineering, hey, if you could climb one mountain in the whole world, what would it be? And more than one person said a mountain named Ama de Blanc. I'd never heard of it. So I looked it up and I'm like, okay, it's located in the Himalayas. It means the mother's necklace and it's the Paramount Pictures logo. I'm like, that sounds like a perfect mountain for me to climb. And so I'm starting to train for that. And as you remember, at the beginning of 2020, the world shut down and no longer was I going to be traveling anywhere to climb a mountain. And I was going to be a homeschool teacher to my 7 beautiful children.
Wow.
So I was doing the homeschool thing. And when my son was struggling with this math homework, I'm like, you got this. We do hard things. You keep at it. Like, you'll get it. And he looked at me and he goes, if we do hard things, why are you climbing a mountain called I'm a Dumb Blonde instead of a real mountain like Mount Everest? I said, Ama Blom, honey. Nah, I'm a dumb blonde. Thank you. So you finish your homework. We'll look at Everest. So he did, and we did. And when he went to bed, I thought, you know what? If Everest is the hardest mountain in the world to him, I'm going to climb it. And I'm going to let him know that whatever Everest is, we're capable of doing.
Wow.
And so I called the coach. Coach said, yes, I can get you ready. And the coach mailed me a book about becoming an uphill athlete because I had climbed one mountain before. So I had fitness. I just didn't have the skills or techniques that you need to be a mountaineer. And in the front of the book, there was this lady who received a Guinness World Record for doing something in the Alps. And I remember being on a phone call with my coach saying, like, I could have done that. Like, I can suffer. I have 7 children. I'm homeschooling. I am
Yeah.
not a cool mom right now. There is 0 cool things about me. My kids learned how to read on Guinness World Record books. If I got a World Record, I'd be the coolest mom ever. And my coach took that as a challenge. He's like, okay, I'll think of something. Don't worry. And I was like, okay, but I'm not growing pumpkins or growing long fingernails or any of those weird things that we read about in the record books. He's like, don't worry, I got you. And then a few weeks later, he called me back. He's like, Jen, I have the perfect world record for you. I'm like, okay. Because I think you should be the first woman to climb the 7-second summits. I'm like, all right, but what are those? I don't even know what that is. He goes, okay, listen. He goes, it's been done by one male. They're harder than the first 7. And it's 7 continents, 7 mountains, 7 children. It's a jackpot. Like, it's the perfect goal for you. I said, I do want to empower people to let them know that the limitation is what they make it. I want to travel the world. This sounds like a really cool quest. If no female's done it, especially if it's respected within the mountaineering community, I'm in. So I signed up. I had never slept in a tent before, but those are details. We figured that out.
It's okay. You you just gave so much, and so I just need to really dial into what you just said. You just said you've never slept in a tent, but you're gonna be
Correct.
7 continents, 7 mountains. Why do you think it turned from writing a small goal of just climbing a mountain
Yep.
to something bigger, to something bigger, to something that's just ginormous thing that most people would just go, "Sure." Right? Like,
Yeah.
I saw what happened in the story, like, it obviously had its, exclamation points, but
Yep.
why did you what's different about you that allowed it to get there? Why are you going big?
I think this timing of events, right? I think the car accident really shifted me. It was a line in the sand for my life
Wow.
because who cares if I failed? Right? I wasn't worried about succeeding. I was worried about having the experience and getting to meet other people and other cultures. And the mountain gave me a pursuit of something that was consistent on each place. It gave me something to work towards. It gave me something to lock into. It hadn't been done by a woman before. So I'm like, if I didn't succeed, okay, no big deal. No one else has. That's a female. Only one male's done it. So that gave me permission to stay curious and try. And it just sounded like a big enough thing that it was worth my energy. I have 7 children that are competing for my time. If I'm gonna say yes to something, it has to be significant.
Yeah, has to be big. What do you
Yeah.
think I'm gonna ask the same question in 2 different perspectives because you've obviously your children, are a huge part of your story, but also this story that you've created. I love how it
Mhm.
ties into the fact that I do hard things. I had 7 children. My my wife who's had 4 at home would be right in the same camp with you and be like, "No, I'm that chick." Okay. So I'm with you. What do you think they're saying or thinking even about what you're putting together right now?
Yeah. At the beginning, I don't know if they knew, right? I don't know if any of us knew. I wasn't a mountaineer that could give them any kind of experience. So when the challenge was presented to myself, we started looking up where the mountains were on the map. We started understand, oh, like I get to go to Africa or I get to go to Antarctica or, like there's all these sexy things that are fun because you're filling in the blank because you don't know that much. Oh, that'd be really cool to see or that'd be really cool to experience. The interesting thing is that in the beginning, I did climb Everest, right? And when I went to climb Everest, I'd never been away from home for more than 3 weeks. So I was super nervous about going to that climb because it was such a big one and it was so long. I was afraid that it wasn't a good time because I had kids at home. And what would that do to them? And I wasn't going to be there. And I've always been here. And then I stopped for a second. I'm like, that's a limiting belief I'm subscribing to. Is there another option? Is there another truth that also is available for me to latch onto? And so I had set up help at home and I went to the kids' school and I talked to the teachers and I said, hey, listen, I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks. I have things set up at home, but I'm not there. So it's going to be different. And my kids might have a hard time adjusting and they might be a little more sensitive. Can you offer them a little bit more grace during this time frame? The school came back and one-upped it. They said, "Jen, why don't you come in and teach the kids about setting goals and what's your Everest campaign?"
Mm,
So I went into the school. I talked to all the classrooms about setting goals. The kids had little hikers with flags. They wrote what their Everest goal was on that flag. In the front of the school, we put up a big mountain. And then we had a little hiker that was me. And I had a tracking device on me while I was climbing. And so then the school could move me up and down the mountain depending on where I was.
yeah.
And in today's day and age, you have Wi-Fi at base camp of Mount Everest. So I could call into the classrooms and answer questions about what I ate, where I pooped, and all the different things that kids ask. And so then when I summited Everest, it wasn't, I physically summited it, but my entire community was with me. Everybody was behind me. And my kids felt so seen, so loved, so empowered about their mom was doing something cool that everybody cared about.
Yeah.
And I talk about it a little bit in my book about big mountains take big teams.
That's
So
right.
if you're going to do a big pursuit, you have to have a big team behind you to make that happen because otherwise you're going to run out of energy. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot harder than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And so that was, since that happened early in the pursuit, everybody really got on board with what I was doing. And my kids were probably my biggest cheerleaders.
Yeah, I can imagine. What do you fast forward, 30 years, and what are your kids telling their kids about this time in their life?
I don't know. Who knows, right? I do know that the kids come over after school and I'm still the mom that climbed Everest. They're like, "Oh, you're the mom that climbed Everest. I wanna climb Everest someday." I'm like, "I'm here for you when you do. You let me know. I will train." And then some of my kids will be like, "You don't wanna train for Everest. It's a lot."
Do any of the 7 have aspirations to follow mom?
Yeah, I took well, they had school off on Monday this week, and I took 3 of them climbing for the afternoon just to get out in nature, and the cool thing about climbing is it's scary. Right? There's fearful spots, and they get through those spots, and their confidence soars.
Mm.
And then they come home with, like, a little proud peacock chest up, and
Yeah,
that's
that's right.
okay, right? Like, I'm all about building that muscle of courage and metabolizing fear and these different pieces. 3 of them I'm taking climbing in February to Kenya.
Wow.
So, we're gonna do one of the mountains I did just to have them have that experience, and we're gonna volunteer while we're there. So, it's in our life.
Yeah. Yeah, you've integrated it, and so it's not that you're trapping them with it, but you're actually developing them through it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's incredible. What do you think for the listeners right now? I mean, they're they're running a maybe a small service company with 2 guys, or maybe they've got a $300 million commercial development. And they're wondering how you climbing Everest and your community coming with you applies to them. What would you say?
I would ask them to look at their goals and see who around them can be a part of it. Who can help them? Who can they help? So, one of the unique things about climbing mountains is that we can all picture the person on top waving the flag. I made it to the summit. Here's my flag to prove it, right? And we sometimes convince ourselves that we climb for the summit.
Mm,
But I think that's a story. Because if we truly just wanted the summit, we would take helicopters and go from summit to summit, jump out, wave our flag, and take photos. The reality is that that summit is so significant because it symbolizes all the times we overcame and who we became in the pursuit of this goal. So when we're at the top and we're waving our flag, we're really signaling to ourselves, like, look what I can achieve. Look what I can accomplish. Look what I've overcome. And so when you're in a business, no matter what the size is, you need to wave your flag. And it's fun to wave it at the top, but you need to wave it along the journey because then it signals to the world, here's what I'm trying to do, here's what I need, and here's how I can help. And I'll share this with you. When I was climbing, I was saving Mount Kenya for the end because Mount Kenya is a pretty technical rock climb. And I didn't really have rock climbing skills. So I'm like, oh, I'll just put this at the end and it'll give me more time to develop those skills. Well, I had posted that, hey, I'm trying to become the first woman to do this pursuit. That's not my personality. My personality before was we're going to talk about it once it's done. But my friends convinced me to share the journey because that was the closest they were going to ever get to these environments and they wanted to see it unfold.
Yeah.
So I had it on Instagram that that's what I was trying to do. The first climb I did was in South America and then I got a message on Insta and they said, "Hey, are you going to Kenya soon?" I said, "Actually, it's not, I was planning on saving it for the end. Like, do you think you could like bump it up if we could help you?" And I'm like, "Potentially, what's going on?" So I got on the phone and we talked, and there was this charity that had raised funds to provide an ambulance for a place in Kenya. And mind you, this is like 2021 and COVID's just ending and there's a lot of need over there. They're like, "We don't want to pay to send somebody over from our charity to represent us. So if you would be willing to represent us and help us with this charity lift, then we would be able to connect you with some climbing coaches and stuff from the other side." And I'm like, I started going to Vegas every weekend to start training rock climbing with a couple of my kids to improve those skills. And I got to go, I put Kenya as my second climb. I
Wow.
went in February 2021. I got involved in that charity. I also got involved in another charity, which was a period poverty thing and helped bring period products to women there so they could stay in school during that time of the month for them. And I got to climb the mountain.
Yeah.
Okay? It was such an amazing story, and that's because I was waving my flag and letting my community know, "Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's what I need. Here's how I can help." And so if you have a business, no matter where you are, does your community know what those things are? Are you waving your flag? Because if you wave your flag, it allows the universe to work with you to make your things possible.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's so much power in everything you just said. It's it's a moment in time where we're hearing this incredible thing unfold, and even just the things that we know, like, as soon as you say, "Well, it's more about the journey," or "It's more about, the work and the overcoming that it took to get to the top," that's what makes the top special, and we recognize that, like, we're in agreement with you on that. But you know as well as I know that the listener who already agrees with you, but then immediately thinks, but I'm in one of those tough moments right now and it's hard, or I don't know how to get over it, right? Which brings us back to your word resilience or persistence. And so, talk about some of those maybe moments in your own business or on the mountain that they might be right now going, I hear you that the top's going to be amazing and that the journey is cool, but like it sucks right now and I'm hurting and I don't know how to overcome it. What would you say?
Yeah. I have a lesson from the mountain that will apply first, then we can get into business tactics if we want. But when I went to climb Everest, for example, I thought that you went from base camp to the top and it just took you that long to make it happen. When I got there, I realized there's this thing called acclimatizing. And so acclimatizing means you go up to from base camp to either camp 1 or camp 2 depending on your genetic makeup and then you hit a point of failure. You cannot go any higher because there's not enough oxygen in the air for your body to be able to continue. So you hit that point of failure. You try to eat lunch there. So you live in the point of failure as much as possible. And then you come back down to base camp and you stay at base camp for another 3 to 4 days. And when you're at base camp, your body starts doing a physiological change and starts producing more red blood cells. It didn't know to produce those red blood cells until you hit the point of failure.
Right.
And so now that you hit the point of failure, you came back down, your body's like, oh man, we got to adjust because this is the new thing that we're going up against. It makes all these red blood cells. You go back up and you're skipping at camp 2. Where the week before, you're like, what are we going to do? Like, what do we do? Right? I mean, it's an entirely different experience.
Yeah.
And so in business, when you're running up against that obstacle or that failure or that setback, that's a chance to come back to base camp. What did you learn? What do you see in this environment? What's going well? What's not going well? How can you acclimate your current situation to be able to go further up the path the next time you go up the mountain?
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that we always need to keep in mind. Like, we're climatizing. We're not going to get there the first time every time. And if you're running into a rough spot, take a breather, take a step back, spend a little bit of time evaluating the situation and figuring out now what you know, how can you do it better?
Yeah. How long before you knew the answer, how long did you think it was going to take to get to the top of Everest?
I mean, my expedition was quick because I live at altitude. So I know teams that are there for 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
I told them that was not an option for me because I have little kids at home. And so I rented this machine that you put on your bed that simulated a lack of oxygen environment.
Hmm.
So I could acclimatize at home
Early.
and go there for a lot shorter period of time. So I thought I was going for 3 weeks, and that's how long it took me to get to the top and bottom.
Got
I
it.
really didn't pay attention until I got into it that, oh, no, actually, it takes about 5 days to climb Everest and get back down.
Yeah.
But all that other time is spent like going up and down the mountain to get your body ready to handle that less oxygenated environment so that you're less likely to get injured or hurt.
Right. Yeah, I think that picture of time, even in your mind of 3 weeks, and that's how long it took you, but that's not how long it takes,
Right.
right? And it's the 2 steps forward, 1 step back, phrase that we hear oftentimes in life or business. This might be a little bit of an interesting question. I don't know if you'll have an answer for it, but in business or life for that matter, what are the red blood cells that we're coming back down to build?
Yeah, I think that depends on what industry you're in. Okay. So, for example, for me, when I was in the financial service industry, I had an idea of what it was supposed to look like. I'm like, okay, we're going to have this building, we're going to have a secretary, a color copy machine, our name on the sign, and all this kind of stuff. And so I put a ton of money and time and resources into making that happen. And then all of a sudden, I had a client meeting, and my client meeting was with the CEO of a credit union. And in our meeting, I found out that the credit union was going to start offering investment services to their membership, where before laws prevented them from being able to do that. But with this law change, they were going to be able to do this service. And I was like, hey, I can do that. I'm helping you. I can help your membership. And she's like, oh, yeah, I didn't even think about it. Why don't you apply? So I gave a presentation to the board, and the board selected to go with me. And so now all of a sudden, my business was in their office. So I didn't need office space, right? I was white labeling the program. So I was marketing under their name instead of my own name. And a whole bunch of things looked different than what I thought. And so now all of a sudden, this was a very lucrative business from a number of perspectives. So I pulled out of the current business that I was in and I started down this other path, but I had to learn the way that that path worked, right? Like, what does the incentives look like to get referrals from tellers? Now I don't need to make cold calls, but I need to build relationships with these people. And how does that work? And our first rendition of that program was garbage. I mean, total garbage, but it was like we had to have something to make tweaks from. And
Right.
so then we realized, okay, this works and that works or this doesn't. And now we modified and now the program is almost 20 years old. It's a whole different ballgame than what it was year 1.
Yeah. Hey, kings and queens, Chaz Wolfe. I want to talk to you about something that's super important to me. We put a lot of time and effort, we meaning myself and my team, into this podcast, into the content that goes out every single day. And if you have been getting any sort of value or insight from this, we want it to be able to reach other business owners too. So we would love if you would like, comment, share, leave a review. post, share again, all of the things on social media, on all the different platforms, or even on the podcast mediums of Apple and Spotify. We would love to be able to get our content into more hands, more entrepreneurs, so they can grow their business as quick as possible. Together, we are building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs who are committed to growing their businesses to new heights. So let's do this. Let's help each other. Let's help each other grow. Yeah, you've taken a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 steps back.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think that before we kind of move on from this, kind of forward, backward motion, what do you think that most entrepreneurs are missing outside of the obvious of that this is the normal track, that it goes a little bit forward and a little bit back and a little bit forward and a little bit back? That in itself is a huge revelation, and I get that, but is it the mindset of understand like being able to flow with that? Is it emotional control through that? What are most people, because they understand what you're saying, but they're not
Yeah.
doing it. What are they missing, do you think?
Maybe the bandwidth to absorb it.
Okay.
So I think when you climb a mountain, the top's only halfway. You
Okay.
have to
Good
get all
point.
the way back to base camp, right?
Right.
You're
Okay.
not well, you're not free until you're
You're not
back to base
there.
camp.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when we're building a business, we have this idea of what the summit is or what our goal is or what our next like KPI is going to be. But the reality is when we're making that decision, are we leaving enough slush to make it all the way home?
Yeah. It's good.
And what happens if we have to go down a different route than we came up because of something happened? And so I really love the mountain metaphor when I'm looking at my business decisions because now I'm not just looking to the summit. I'm looking to how can we make it back? Can we absorb whatever we're doing, have enough bandwidth to be able to go out again and give it another shot?
Yeah. I think it goes back to a point that you made earlier, that the summit really isn't the end destination, right?
Mhm.
If the journey is really our focus, then the journey includes going up and back down. And so I think you're spot on with that, because, maybe a more practical way is to say that it's going to cost more, take more effort, and take a lot longer than you think. Always.
Always, always. The
Always.
runway is always longer. I mean, if I look at businesses over the years, and I was actually looking at a business the other day because someone had said, "Oh, you should start like a skincare line with like the 7 summits and the quest that you did and all this kind of stuff."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, that's a lot of money to start one of those from ground zero." I bet you there's a handful of them that are in cash flow issues soon. So why don't we just wait to see if somebody has a formulation that we like, and if they get into a pinch, then we can come in there and buy it. If you look at subdivisions that were developed in Park City, it's usually the 3rd buyer that has success with the subdivision because they worked out all the bugs and didn't have the bandwidth with those first 2 buyers.
Yeah.
So, when you're thinking about your business, what stage are you in? What makes sense for you to continue to move forward on? And are you positioning yourself to absorb the things that you're pursuing?
Yeah. Do you think that in order to really be able to prepare for the absorption, to really know, like, okay, it's the journey of the up and down, we got to be prepared for that. How much clarity do I need as far as what, because I mean, you'd never been up and down before on the mountain. So how much
Right.
clarity did you have, or will someone need on the journey that they don't know what it's going to be like, but they still have to have all this known bandwidth?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the $1,000,000 question for all of us. If we had that answer, it'd just be tick, 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 success. I
Right.
will say that, climbing Everest is very commercialized. It's much easier than it's ever been. If you had to climb in the 80s, I can't even imagine having to figure out how to do that. Nowadays, we have drones. We can fly drones over the ice field and be like, oh, yep, chick, 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 this works. We can put ladders here and we can make that happen. Back in the day, you didn't have that. You would walk to a
Yeah.
point and be like, "Just kidding, this isn't gonna go. We gotta come back and figure out if we can go up another way." Right? So, there's advantages to being in industries that have more depth of knowledge and more experience of people going through because it just makes the pathway a little bit clearer. When we climbed the mountain in Antarctica, I think I was the 15th person or the 15th to 20th person to summit. Okay, there's not a lot of beta out there. There's a lot of noise. So when we're going up that mountain and we're looking at notes from people that had climbed it a few years before us, there's a rock. We're like, okay, is that rock fall down the mountain? Is it underneath the
Yeah.
snow? Where did it go? Like, I'm not really quite sure. And so the
Wow.
strategy that we used to climb that mountain was an entirely different strategy than we used to climb Everest. And so if
Yeah.
you're in a new frontier and you're developing a new thing, your calculations have to be much more conservative than if you're in an established industry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really concise. Let's go with just the growth in technology and the ability for whether it be drones or Wi-Fi at base camp in the analogy on the mountain. But how does that apply today where you could probably say something similar? It's the easiest that it's ever been to start a business. It's the easiest that it's ever been to make money. It's the easiest that it's ever been fill in the blank when it comes to business. But very similar to the mountain. That doesn't mean everybody does it, even though that it's easy. And then even though you still have those things, you still have to learn the tactics and actually do the playbook. What do you think that there's across here as far as from like the technology perspective? The people who are listening right now, the access that they have to things that maybe they aren't using that you can give some insight on.
I think we have so many things now that it's easy to get lost before you even get started.
Yeah.
I mean, so for example, in my branding as Jenn Drummond, there's TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, website, email list. Like there's so many things that you could be spending money in all these categories and you're barely getting any lift because you're just a little player in all the ponds. So I think when you're starting out, you have to decide like what's my platform? What platform am I going to dominate on? And just put a lot of energy into and be like this is my area. And then once things start coming in or generating revenue, you can say, okay, now we're going to start branching into this other piece. We're going to start doing this other side of things to be able to show different sides of our personality or different things that the different platforms allow. But just really honing in on where you want to start and shut out the noise around you of you need to be all places at all times because that's really hard to have the revenue coming in to support that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a little bit of a fallacy, I think, just that we need to be everywhere at all
Right.
times for all
Right.
people, right?
Right.
A little bit of those, I like the way that you framed the limiting belief that you had earlier, and then your ability to release that and then latch on to something different. That's in essence what you just did with social media, for example. So we got to get
Mhm.
rid of this belief that we have to be all places or all things to all people, even.
Yes, so much so. Definitely. It's courage. It takes a ton of courage to be who you are and to have the entire world tell you, you need this, you need this, you need this, you need this. I can help you with this. I can turn this into shorts. I can turn this into whatever. And you have to be, oh no, I have my blinders on. Here's what I'm doing. Thanks for the noise. I'm not interested. And you get good at saying no because everything you say no to gives you bandwidth to say yes to what really serves you.
That's right. Right. What have you done to help identify those things that serve you? And whether you share the practicals of those, it doesn't maybe as matters much, but what's the exercises that you've done in preparation, like the mountain, for being able to say no in that moment? Because that's what I've learned is that the no in that moment is just so much easier when I'm super clear on where I'm headed, like you just said.
Mhm. I really have to plug into myself every day. And sometimes multiple times a day if I have one of those days that's got a million things going on and just be like, this is my game. This is who I am. This is what I'm trying to achieve. So that when another opportunity comes up, it's easier to identify it as not fitting into the puzzle.
Right.
Right. But if you don't have that clear thing communicated to yourself or understood at a very deep level, everything sounds fun and exciting. And yeah, okay, sure. And then all of a sudden you're everywhere, not as far along the path as you want to be instead of one place further.
Yeah. How does the impact of singular focus work on a mountain? We've kind of talked about it from business and we're going to move it over to the side. We've kind of done the opposite on all the other ones.
Yeah. I learned this in business. Commit to the commitment. So I'll give an example. When I graduated from college, I took a job as a financial advisor. I did not ask great questions in my interview. Okay. I thought I knew what a financial advisor was. I got out of college early. I told my parents I was graduating, and they said, fine, any job you take, you're staying at a year no matter what. I register, worked my courses. I had to take a couple summer classes, and I was done. I show up to my financial advising job. I'm like, hi, I'm Jen. I'm the new financial advisor. Nice to meet you. And she's like, hey, Jen, great for you to show up. That table over there with a phone and a phone book is yours. Go help yourself. I'm
Get
like, "Oh,
busy.
no, no, no. I'm the financial advisor. That's call center. Different." She's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, honey. It's not. So go over there. You'll learn and you'll figure it out." So my first 3 weeks of this job, I go home sobbing every single day. I'd never heard the word no so many times in my life. It was absolutely horrible, but I couldn't call my parents. Like, that was not an option. I was fearful of them. I called the school. "Do you think you can get me back in?" Like, I was kidding. "I don't wanna graduate." They're like, "Honey, you're graduate. Like, we'd have to re-register you and everything." I was like,
Wow.
"Oh my goodness, really?" So all of a sudden, I'm like, "Okay, listen, I cannot put any energy into quitting this job. I have 49 more weeks left of it." I circled the day on my calendar when I was allowed to quit. So now all my energy has to go into making this successful and making this fun. And so I bring it to the mountains as well. Like when you go to a location. So say you fly into Pakistan and I'm going to go climb K2. I'm not debating whether I'm climbing K2 or not. Now all my energy is, how do I make it fun? How do I keep it safe? How am I making decisions that are moving me closer to the top of this mountain and not away from it? And so when you're in a business decision or you're running towards something, you need to take off the table whether that's going to happen or not, and just be like, "Here's my commitment and this is what I'm committing to." And now all your energy and everything that happens gets to work on how.
Yeah. So powerful. The moments that you've just described, especially, the fun parts of the job, in essence, you were boxed in and you were forced to keep the commitment. But for somebody listening right now who isn't forced, they don't have the constraints of, not being able to call the parents or not being able to quit, whatever the scenario are or is for them. How do they commit to the commitment? Because we understand what you said. How do we do that so that we can focus on the how after the commitment?
You have to be disciplined. You have to have the courage to say, "This isn't going to be fun. This isn't all rainbows and unicorns and puppy dogs right now." And so whatever that is for you, and depending on what you want to receive, like, give it a year. If you can't give it a year, give it a quarter, give it 6 months, give it something where you get to acknowledge that this is a concern or thought that I have, but it's not serving me. So I'm not giving it any more bandwidth, but I'm not going to totally ignore it. So I will revisit it at this date. And then whatever that date is, you save it for that date. And then right now you work on the how.
Yeah. Yeah, something that, comes up often, especially with entrepreneurs, is the getting up at a certain time, maybe having a morning routine, whether it's working out, whatever. And a long time ago when I was trying to build some discipline around this, it wasn't so much whether I would get up or not. I had like a kind of a natural drink that I drink as soon as I wake up. And so my commitment to myself wasn't whether I was going to get up or not. I knew I was getting up. I had to
Right.
get up and drink the drink. And that was my agreement was I'm gonna get up and drink the drink. Because I knew as soon as I drank the drink, there was no way I was going back to sleep.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I actually, to your point, I made the commitment the next level up. I knew I was gonna get up. What was the next thing? Well, the next thing I had to do when I got up was the next thing. Or, that 15 minutes later, someone's gonna show up at my house to work out, or whatever the scenario is that I can build in this forced commitment. In essence, that's what your parents did kind of for you.
Yeah.
But we can do that to ourselves. We can box ourselves in and go, "No, I'm committed, and I'm gonna put people or things or circumstances around me so that I don't really have a way to back out." And then so now my focus can be on the higher level activities. Is that right?
100%. I love it. Drink
Okay.
the drink.
Drink the
Drink the drink.
I still drink it. It's called Early Bird. I love it. I
All
I I
right.
probably should be I should probably they should probably sponsor the podcast.
Yeah, I think they're sponsoring this episode. Thank you.
Seriously. Thank you, Early Bird. All right, so I gotta ask you about family, and then we're gonna wind up here, but you have 7 children, you have a family is what it comes down to.
Yep.
But you also have a fantastically successful business, and then, oh, by the way, you've climbed mountains all over the world. So that's the context of this conversation. We all know that now, but my question is, how have you obsessed? Because I know you don't climb Everest or have a billion in assets or 7 children for that matter. You haven't done anything without obsession. Is really really what I
Yes.
see, and I
Yes.
love it. But how have you obsessed about all of it at the same time?
Yeah, well, it's not out like, I think this idea of balance is baloney. So
I
I think
agree.
if you take out a longer version view, then maybe you'll see balance, but in the day to day, if you're striving for balance, you're gonna get nowhere, in my opinion. So
Yeah,
sorry if I offended some people that are listening.
they can
But what
other
I
show.
yeah, other show, wrong place. I do I do multitask at some level. So, for example, when I was getting ready to go to Everest, I would plug in my kids first. I would plug in my business meetings, and then I'd give my coach my calendar and say, "Hey, good luck." And my coach would look at me like, "You're kidding, right? We need to figure this out." So when we would figure out the fitness part of it, sometimes it would be, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the gym with one of my kids, and we're gonna go lift together." It's not as efficient, but it is effective for what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah.
When I had a son that had soccer games, I would be the mom that'd bring a 12-inch step to the soccer game. I'd have a backpack full of water bottles, and while he was running on that field for an hour and a half, I was up and down doing steps to get those steps in so that I was conditioning my body.
Love it.
So I could have sat there and watched the game, but that wasn't serving my bigger picture. So when you're willing to take on things that don't look like your neighbor, you need to be willing to do things that don't look like your neighbor.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was those types of activities. I would take Zoom calls. If it was possible, I would do them on my phone and walk around the neighborhood, right? Not every Zoom call you need to be next to your computer glued down taking notes. I did that technology thing. There's a little Firefly guy that follows me to all my Zoom meetings, and he takes down all the notes for me. So that it allowed me to walk around and do different things while I was listening. And in fact, it's been so much better for me in meetings because now I'm not worried about writing things down. Now I'm just worried about being present. I have something else that's keeping the notes. So you start finding little hacks in your life that work for you and you start building your calendar that works for you. My girlfriends know we're not going to dinner with Jen. If we want to hang out with Jen, we're going for a walk. And that's it. Like they tease, but they're like, Jen's my walking friend. And we all go out for walks and that's what we do.
Yeah, I love it. I was just thinking of my wife, Julie, who every morning around 6:30, she's downstairs. We have our youngest of 4 is, just a year, and the first basically hour of the morning is her pulling our daughter out of the crib and then working out right there in the room. She's got a TV
Yep.
on that wall and just does her little YouTube workout scenario, and she goes hard, and the baby plays, and then they come up for breakfast, and it's like, wow, how many people are trying to really integrate all the things, or how many more would have just said, "Oh, well, I don't have time for the workout," rather than, like you're saying, integrating the 2, or really it's committing to the commitment, right?
Yeah.
Like what you
Right.
said.
Yeah. You're right.
I've got one last question here for you, Jen. You've been just obviously incredibly inspirational, but some of the things that you've given are just really powerful. I wanna get your perspective. If you had a chance to reach back into time and whisper to the younger Jen, what would you tell her?
Have more fun. 100% have more fun. I think I was so convinced that I needed I just did it the hard way, right? Like I vice script success. I'm like, okay, well, if you're gonna work 8 hours, I'm gonna work 12 and I'm gonna beat you because I put more time in. And I think if I would allowed myself to have a little more time to be successful, I would still be successful, but I would have had more fun along the way.
Yeah.
And I think if you say, hey, I'm gonna be successful, you will be. You'll do the things that successful people do, but do not forget to allow yourself to enjoy the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're committed to the commitment of success, however long it takes,
Mhm.
then somewhere along the way, you get to experience the up and down of the mountain.
Yeah.
Jen, how can we find you? You have a book coming out. All these lessons that you've been sharing about the mountain, they're going to be in this book, I believe. So tell us where to find the
Yes.
book. Tell us where we can find you. And maybe even, I think that you speak on stages. Like there's all kinds of opportunities for us to connect. Or if
Yes.
somehow we need you to manage our money, how do we do that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so the best place to find me is jendrummond.com, and that's double N for Jen. And on that website, it will bring you to if you want to hire me for speaking stuff, if you'd like to buy the book. It's called BREAKPROOF 7 Strategies to Build Resilience and Achieve Your Life Goals. You can pre order on Amazon and get a whole bunch of fun freebies. Otherwise, it will ship January 9. And then it has all my social channels there. So depending on your favorite platform, reach out, say hi, introduce yourself. And when it comes to wealth management, I can introduce you to one of my amazing people that would be happy to help.
I love it. Well, you have been quite the queen here today,
Mm.
sharing all of the pieces of resilience. I look forward to watching the journey, getting the book, all of the things that you've deposited, even in me personally here today. I thank you for that. Thank you for being here and sharing with the audience as well. Blessings to you, your family, the whole nine. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Gathering the Kings today. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.